I didn't know what stage 4 meant. Like, all the experience with breast cancer or any cancer I'd had in my life up until that point was like, oh, if you can catch it early, you can beat it. And I genuinely got these results and thought, oh, it's stage 4, but caught early. I can beat it. I didn't understand. And so I told a bunch of people, and then they started reacting in a way that was like, my dad immediately started tearing up. My mom was crying right away. And I kind of went, oh, I don't think I understand what this fully means.
Hey everyone, welcome to season 3. This is Shauna.
And this is Rosalina, and we're your hosts for Too Young for This Shit podcast. This podcast is not just about boobs, but a journey with cancer. We are young millennials, open about giving you our raw and unfiltered look into our lives. We are in no way medical professionals, nor are we offering medical advice. Any medical references are cited directly from public websites or from our personal diagnosis. Some topics and stories may be triggering to those who are fighting, have fought, or have loved someone with cancer. Hi everyone, this is Rosalina.
And this is Shauna. Welcome back to the Too Young for This Shit podcast.
Today we have a special guest with us. Her name is Kiara, and she is a hormone-positive stage 4 metastatic breast cancer thriver. She was diagnosed at the age of 27 in September of 2020. After being told 1 year prior she was quote-unquote too young for cancer, and I feel like we can all relate to this phrase. Since then, she shared her story on publications such as Today.com, Condé Nast, Traveler, InStyle, just to name a few. She is active on Instagram page and keeps her followers updated on her life, whether it's her love for traveling or her updates about her breast cancer journey. Me, Kiara, and Shauna have met online through Be Present, which is an AYA nonprofit for cancer survivors and caregivers, where Kiara is a survivor, content creator, and a podcast host. Shauna and I were featured on Be Present podcast, and now we're bringing Kiara on today to discuss her journey. We are so excited to have you. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to continue the conversation here.
Yes, we recorded before and then we had issues with the internet. So this is the second time around, and hopefully things are good.
Fingers crossed.
Yes. So let's start with this. Can you just take the listeners through how you found out you had breast cancer?
Yeah. So when I was 26, I think I found my lump by myself. I think I was just like watching TV and dropped a remote on my chest. And when I went to pick it up, I was like, oh, that's weird. And I kind of kept an eye on it for a little while. I was really nervous. And when it wasn't going away, I went in to see my primary care physician. I was due for a physical anyway. So I figured, okay, it's free with my insurance. So I might as well just go in, see her, see what she thinks. I really like her and trust her. I went in and she kind of told me what a lot of us have heard, that you're probably too young. This is probably just a cyst. But she did refer me to radiology to have it looked at. So I went to radiology, and the radiologist who I spoke to came in the room and was like, this is only a 3-millimeter cyst. I can't believe you can even feel it. You shouldn't be here. Kind of almost shamed me out of the room. But it was like, but if it starts to hurt, come back and we can just drain it. And so I went a year nearly to the day, and my physical was due. The lump had grown significantly and it was really starting to hurt. And so I thought, okay, due for a physical again. I'll go see her, get another referral to radiology, and they'll just drain it really quickly. So go see her. And this time her tune has completely changed. She felt it and she was like, oh my God, like this has grown quite a bit from last time. And it's really hard and irregular. This is really concerning. And so she sent me to radiology. Again, I had a different radiologist this time who I will never forget. The tech was scanning me and I kept trying to make conversation and make jokes like I always do when I'm nervous with the doctor. And she was having none of it. She was super quiet, super awkward. I knew something was kind of up. And the doctor came in and was making conversation about everything but the scan. And I was like, okay, so can we drain this now? And he was like, I'm so sorry. There's no cyst here. And I would bet money that it's breast cancer. And so, yeah, that was pretty horrifying. He was the nicest person. Him and his entire team skipped their lunch break that day so that they could biopsy me like on the spot, which was super nice because we were going into a holiday weekend. And he was super cool. But even once that biopsy came back, it was always, we've caught this early. We've caught this early. You're going to be fine. It's early. Right. And so I went on believing that. And the only person who didn't tell me that was my medical oncologist, who said, look, I hope we've caught this early. You're very young, but I can't tell you anything until we get your CT scan results back. And I knew nothing about CT scan. I didn't know what the word metastatic meant. I knew nothing. And so I got the scan results on my phone and I didn't really understand them. And I thought that if you got like cancer on a scan, they couldn't just release it to you in the portal. And so she called me and was like, hey, we got your CT results back. I was like, yeah, they were good, right? She was like, no, this is not the news I wanted to tell you, but the cancer looks to be all over your bones. And at this point, we're having a stage 4 conversation. I had been scheduled for my port placement the next day. They canceled that. It was kind of a whirlwind from there of completely changing everything that I had just learned about like early stage breast cancer.
When you mention about you receiving your results via phone and thinking that, oh, they don't send you the results unless it's something bad. And I was totally with you there as well. I thought once I received my results, like, oh, it's nothing. And then, yeah, sometimes I guess they just release it.
I know. I'm not sure I'm a fan of it. Like now that I know I'm stage 4, yeah, release it to me. I can read these reports now. But before diagnosis, don't release that to me in an online
Yes.
portal.
Yeah. I got mine on a Saturday at 4:30 in the afternoon.
Oh my God.
My PET scan results. And like luckily I was able to read it, and I was with a friend who was a nurse who was able to read it like for me, which was great. But I mean, regardless whether it's good or bad, and if you don't understand, especially the terminology, like to have to wait till Monday to find out.
Well, and then you go to Google and Google just makes you spiral, right?
Yes.
Like there's no good scenario.
No,
There
definitely
isn't.
not.
But also, I want to point out when the first radiologist, I think you mentioned, saying, oh, it's nothing, it's a cyst. I think that us as human beings, I think that we always want to kind of try to give good news to people. I feel like there's like a fine line with that. Don't tell me good news unless you're absolutely 100% sure it is a cyst.
I know it's such a tricky thing. He had
Yeah.
ultrasounded it, but I don't think it was a complete picture that he got from what I can tell. But I honestly, I would have a little more empathy if that's what he was trying to do. But
Yeah.
I kind of explained my story to someone I know who works in the same medical group as him.
Yeah.
And immediately, like I told the story, I didn't give any identifying characteristics. And she immediately went, oh, it was Dr. X, wasn't it? She knew right away, like he has a history of dismissing concerns. He's really old and probably should be retired. I'm not the first one he's done this to. And that was even tougher pill to swallow. This guy's just doing this and it's fine.
I mean, my jaw dropped. That is crazy and
Yeah.
insane. The first thought that I was that I was thinking about is, can we have a list of people signing for him to retire? Because he shouldn't be there. He shouldn't be working there anymore if that's what he does.
No, I absolutely agree. And in the beginning, I had a lot of people go, why don't you pursue a medical malpractice lawsuit? But doctors are so protected that if anyone tried to
Yes.
go after him, there's no recourse. This is just what he's going to be doing.
Yeah, this is so frustrating. So when you found out that you were stage 4, did it take you time to tell family members and friends? Or did you tell them right away what's happening?
I didn't know what stage 4 meant. Like all the experience with breast cancer or any cancer I'd had in my life up until that point was like, oh, if you can catch it early, you can beat it. And I genuinely got these results and thought, oh, it's stage 4, but caught early. I can beat it. I didn't understand. And so I told a bunch of people, and then they started reacting in a way that was like, my dad immediately started tearing up. My mom was crying right away. And I kind of went, oh, I don't think I understand what this fully means. And then you go to Google and it's like you have 3 to 5 years to live. And that day was just a spiral because I told everyone and it was their reactions that told me how bad it was.
Thank you for your honesty with that, because I think that it takes so much courage to actually admit that you didn't know. And I would also say, like, for me, I didn't really necessarily, like, I knew what breast cancer was, but I didn't know there were like different stages. I didn't know there were different types. So I am on board with you of like, I was so clueless, like what anything
Absolutely.
was with breast cancer.
Absolutely. I feel like it's just the people who have close friends or family members who go through it who know this stuff, but you don't learn it anywhere until you turn mammogram age otherwise. And that's like a real disservice to us.
I agree. My maternal aunt was, I think, 52 when she died of metastatic breast cancer. She was in remission for like maybe 4 or 5 years. And I didn't realize too until I was diagnosed and then was understanding metastatic breast cancer. So I remember when it came back, it was in her bones, and I remember thinking like, oh, that's like a totally different cancer. Like I didn't
Yeah.
realize that no, that's she like her breast cancer came back and had metastasized. And I didn't know that until and it's so funny because I didn't think about it even until after I got diagnosed that she died from breast cancer. She didn't die from bone cancer that had then spread.
Yeah, that's something that I had to learn as well. And then educating the people around me. Like, I remember I made an appointment at Stanford, like a really good hospital here. And I was talking to people, and they were like, well, is Stanford the best for bone cancer, though? Because I'm reading about osteosarcomas. And I'm like, no, I don't have an osteosarcoma. This is breast cancer that's moved to my bone. There's just so little understanding of cancer. I think people are so afraid of it that they can't have the conversation, and it just does such a disservice to all of society, I feel.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone is afraid of the word and even thinking
Mhm.
about it too, to be honest. So now that I guess you got diagnosed, you said 27, and now you realize that you have stage 4 cancer, and that presents just a whole different challenge of itself. And that could include emotional, physical, and the constant need for medical appointments and scans. Can you just shed light on those like challenges as someone who's living with stage 4 cancer?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many to list. I think a lot of it at first was okay, well, if I have 3 to 5 years to live, what is the point of any of this, right? Especially being diagnosed during the pandemic. It was like, why am I poisoning myself for such a short amount of time? Now, we know now that with a lot of new advances in treatment, it's probably more than 3 to 5 years. But regardless, that was such a hard thing to overcome of what is the point if there's no end stage was a really big one for me. And then also, I have to have scans every 3 months, and those are going to determine the next 3 months for me, right? Am I going to stay on the current treatment or am I going to move to a new one? And so, in some ways, it feels like I can only plan my life every 3 months. And I'm a big, like, I am type A to a T. I need everything planned and scheduled and organized and all of that. And so, that is really, really difficult. And up until recently, I was kind of okay every 3 months, at least I have these 3 months. But recently, I was having pain, had an MRI, and it was an off cycle MRI only like a couple weeks after my PET scan. And it came back with not what was causing the pain, but it did find new meds. And so then all of a sudden, I thought I had these 3 months. I only got 1 month, and now I'm on a new treatment, right? It's this constant uncertainty of what's going on in your body. And thinking about when I was diagnosed, I didn't have any symptoms besides a lump, despite having extensive bone metastasis. So it's this constant fear of like, well, what if it's moved somewhere else? I'm not going to know because I didn't feel it the first time, despite it being in my entire skeleton, right? So there's a lot of stuff. And I'm also working full time. And so trying to navigate like a 45-hour work week with someone who doesn't fully understand the whole team, they're never going to understand what it's like to be living with this. And so in some ways, you're treated like a normal employee, which is great. But then when you have to be gone for a couple hours a month for doctor's appointments and scans and this, that, the other thing, and you can't always be online, that's also difficult to navigate as well. There's so much. I'll leave it there.
So, one of the things that I read online from people who have stage 4 cancer is dealing with health insurance. And that is something that causes a lot of stress. And I feel like on top of that, having stage 4 cancer as well causes that too. So I'm wondering on your end, do you have to deal with insurance on a monthly basis of trying to make sure that your treatments are being approved?
Yeah, insurance is a constant nightmare. We've gotten to the point where my oncologist will put an order in for my scans at least a month before they need to be scheduled because insurance drags their feet up until the very last day they have to make a decision on whether I am deserving of a PET scan. And then usually they'll say no, and then my doctor has to do the peer-to-peer and appeal it. Every single scan cycle has been like this for the last 3 years that I've been living with this. So the scans are a nightmare. Getting new treatments too has been a nightmare. I have really bad insomnia, and my psych oncologist tried to prescribe me something for it. I didn't want to be on Ativan or like very, what do you call it?
Like narcotics, if you don't want to be
Yes, exactly. I didn't want to be on like narcotics or heavy drugs that have a risk of addiction. And so she prescribed me something, and my insurance came back and said, that's too expensive and you haven't tried the cheaper option. So I'm basically being forced to try these things that I know I don't want to do when there feels like there's a safer option for me, right? There's so many little pieces of it. But then beyond that, it's just having insurance to begin with. The insurance that you would get from the government if you're not employed is not going to cover near enough of what I need to stay alive. And I don't know how long I'm going to be doing this. So while I do have a decent amount in savings, it doesn't go very far when you're looking at treatment that's $13,000 a month. So I work full time in order to have insurance because I'm not married. And that is also really scary. Like my company just did a massive round of layoffs, and they told us and then said, within the next 45 minutes, you're going to get an email whether you're employed or not still. And so I was just sitting there like, I don't think I'm going to be insured. I'm not going to be able to survive, right? It's insurance, just the entire way that it is set up in this country is just a nightmare when you're 30 years old dealing with a severe terminal illness.
Yeah, I was going to say we had an episode on navigating our jobs and treatment and stuff, and one of the things that we mentioned was we're kind of tied to our jobs because our jobs provide the health insurance, and so if we lose our job, we lose the insurance. And so it's a big deal, especially when you have cancer. It's a whole nother different game.
Terminal cancer, I mean, you losing your job is essentially like a life or death matter on whether or not you could afford.
Right. And like, you think about too, okay, I work really hard. I have a great track record. I've won awards, whatever. Everyone's, well, you'll land on your feet. Okay, maybe. I get a new job, then I have to wait a full year before I can go on disability insurance through my job, right? And I am 3 years into a terminal disease. I don't know if I have a year to wait for that, right? And then I don't know, I feel like it's gotten to the point where I feel so I have to have this job and so tied to this job that I don't enjoy it as much as I used to anymore. And I loved my career pre-cancer, but it's just become such a big stressor because of the way it's so tied to insurance.
Yeah, it's definitely something where it's a very challenging thing, of course. Now you don't really like your job anymore, but you still have to keep it because you still want to keep living life and as much as you can.
And I know you said you haven't loved your job recently. And do you think you haven't gone on to look for another one, obviously, other than insurance, but because you feel like you would have to disclose your terminal illness?
Well, so I actually did get a new job mid cancer diagnosis, and that was like a really tricky thing because the company I was at got acquired, and the acquiring company was like, I could just tell from the get go they were not going to be supportive of what I needed for my disease. So I left. But it was like, when do you disclose? How do you disclose? And I'm thankful that when I disclosed to my manager, he was really understanding. They had actually already Googled me, so they knew. But yeah, I think it's just really difficult. I don't know that a new job would fix the problem. I think just I love my job. My boss is great. My company's great. It's just the feeling of I have to be doing this. I have to be on all the time. It's this feeling like I'm almost an indentured servant to the company that really makes me dislike it. It's not anything to do with the work. I actually love the work that I do. So it's, I don't know, it's a weird and tricky experience.
Has there been like shifts with the way maybe that your family member maybe would ask about how you're doing or like your friendships with your friends? Has that changed throughout the 3 years?
Yeah, I think it's changed really significantly within the first 6 months to a year. You've got all of those people coming out of the woodwork that you haven't spoken to in however many years, and they're buying you pink things and they're setting up the fun runs and all of that stuff. And that's great. My closest friends were really, I had one who was sending flowers every week because she was out of state and really supportive in the way that they knew how to. But I think as time went on, it's just really hard to support someone who is always going to be going through something worse than you. I feel like a lot of people started feeling like they couldn't come to complain to me. I had a close friend get diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, and every time she would come to me to talk about it, it would always be like, well, I know you're going through something so much worse, and so I really feel like I shouldn't even be saying this. And it was always, I feel like the disease just put that distance because she voiced it so we could have that conversation. I think many people are feeling that, but don't want to voice it because they feel like an asshole. And so we can't then have the conversation about it. And so I've been feeling, especially in the last maybe year or so, there's a lot more distance in friendships because they can't understand what I'm going through. I can't relate to where they are in their life stage, right? Planning for kids, buying homes, things that are never going to be part of my story. And so it just really has felt like it's slowly put more and more distance. Those people who came out of the woodwork are long gone. The support seems like it's less there. I'm struggling more than I was, but you can't just be there for someone every day for 3 years, right? Like, I don't blame them. But yeah, it's really, really changed how all of my relationships are and were.
Do you find that people don't want to share their happy things with you as well? So they don't want to make you feel bad? That was like a big thing. I felt like when I was diagnosed that I had friends that were getting pregnant and, like you said, getting married and getting engaged and having all of these major life moments. And I was going through chemo. And I just remember feeling like I want to hear all the good things, but I feel like some people sometimes feel like it's just not fair to share.
Yeah, I think especially at the beginning, people were like that. And I was open to, if my friends would talk about fertility at the table and I would kind of get up, and I can't be listening to how hard fertility is for you when I'm weighing the idea of removing my ovaries. And I have since done so, right? And so some of it is hard for me to hear. And I think people don't know where the line is. And so they just don't share, or they'll share with this like, well, I really don't want to make you feel bad, so if you don't like talking about this, we can stop. It feels like it's always qualified by something, because we're so different now that we don't know how to relate to each other, and it's like a really hard thing to watch happen.
Right. And even like it's just going to be uncomfortable regardless, right? Like if they have to ask you, if you're uncomfortable, we could stop talking about this. And then if you say, yeah, it's uncomfortable, then everybody in the room is uncomfortable because now, it's been addressed that you're uncomfortable. So that's tough. I can't, it's hard too. And like you said, you need that support, and you had all these people like rallying and just everybody's moving on and everybody's moving forward. And not that you're in a standstill, but your life is just very different.
Absolutely. And it's sometimes like I identified it maybe 6 months ago that it was happening. And at first I was like so mad at all these people. And then I took a step back and I was like, what do you expect? People can't just put their lives on hold for you and they have to go back to living things normally. Like, I don't know what the right thing is here. And I don't have any anger towards these people, but it's mostly just I'm really sad. I'm really sad that this disease has done this to my relationships with people who mean so much to me.
Yeah, it is very challenging, I think, because like you said, I also don't know what the right or wrong answer is too. I think everyone is different in terms of what their needs are and what they could also handle too. So I think it's on like a person by person case.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I was gonna say, and there's like only so much like you can control in those situations, right? So it's like how you control that narrative, and whether it's just like fully focusing on like you and your needs, or still trying to keep those relationships and try to keep the normalcy. But I think focusing sometimes not so much on what everyone else is doing and just focusing on what you need in those moments, right? Is that like an important thing for you, like that you tried to focus on is just yourself, or is it like what gets you through those moments?
Yeah, I mean, I think I really try and put myself in their shoes as much as I can when I get upset about it, and just I get it because I was healthy once and they don't get it because they've never been in my shoes. And so that kind of gets me through. But I think also just having a community who does understand this, having cancer friends, and my boyfriend's a nurse, so he's on an advanced lung disease floor, so it's not cancer but very severe illness. And so those are all things that have really helped, is just having kind of an outside community.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned your boyfriend, which is a great segue to dating and relationships segment that we have for this episode. When was your first time like started to play around the idea of wanting to start dating? And also like what did you want from this and what were your expectations?
Yeah, so I think I went into dating with cancer like probably in a really bad way, because I went into it like, well, who is going to want this? Who's going to sign up to be with someone when forever means like 10 years, right? Who's going to want to sign up for this kind of trauma? And so I had kind of a crappy mindset around it, and just was kind of like, well, maybe I'll meet someone to have fun with. And so I think I really started to think about that as vaccines were starting to become more available, because I got diagnosed during the pandemic. I'm immunocompromised. I was living with my dad, who was also immunocompromised. And if someone's on dating apps, they're probably hanging out with more than just you, right? So that was kind of when I started looking at it, but it was just like the weirdest experience of, I didn't want to just say like, hey, I have metastatic breast cancer on my profile, but I didn't want to go into that with people being totally blind. It was a really tricky thing. And so I remember at one point I got hospitalized, and I was supposed to meet up with someone that weekend when I was in the hospital. And so I just texted him and I was like, I didn't get into detail, but I was just like, I have cancer. I'm in the hospital right now. I should be okay by X date. Can we reschedule? He was great about it, but then we went out and he asked more questions about the cancer, and it was like, it kind of hit me in the face that like I can't date normally anymore. He just started going, well, do you have cancer? Because Americans have bigger breasts, and is that why there's more breast cancer here? And just clearly he was nervous, had no idea what to say, and just word vomited. But it was like, oh my, I don't even know how to answer this. This is the most ridiculous question I've ever heard, and I have A cups, so why are you asking me this? But yeah, that was kind of how early dating went. And after that, I think I went on a couple of dates, but I was kind of like, you know what, I'm just going to pour my time into things that make me happy and not focus on trying to find someone through all of this craziness.
I don't even know what I would have said to this guy. I would have been like, men can get breast cancer too, right?
It's such a stupid thing to say, but then what did I expect him to say? We don't know each other.
Yeah, but I mean, I just feel like there are some things that you don't necessarily say. And that's one of those things that you just you could think about it, but just don't say
Keep it in your brain. Yeah.
Right. And if you had questions, he could have like logically asked you, like, oh, when did you get diagnosed? How long have you been living with this? Blah, blah, blah. Like, there's just so many other questions, and that's what he led with, which seems so wild to me.
Yep. Yeah. It was really a bizarre experience.
Going into the beginning phases, did you kind of had like a pep talk to yourself, or maybe like a list of attributes that you were looking for in a partner? So when I mean giving yourself a pep talk, were you telling yourself, I am who I am, I have stage 4 cancer, and I can't change that, and whoever won't accept me, like, just, it is what it is? What did you do before you started actually dating?
Yeah, I think I kind of was just like, I'm going to leave this up to chance. I get it if someone doesn't want to sign up for this, but like, maybe they will, and maybe it'll be great. And if not, at minimum, it'll be like a fun night out. And so that was generally what I kind of led with. I had no idea what I was looking for. I think at that time, I probably would have told you that it's, yeah, I just want like stability and a stable partner. But now looking back on it, I was lost. I was grasping at straws. I thought I was supposed to be in a relationship. So I started dating, but I had no idea what I was looking for.
Besides the guy that you went on a date with, have you encountered judgment or prejudice while navigating the dating scene as someone with stage 4 cancer?
Absolutely. Sometimes it would come up, like I would talk to someone on an app who says, oh, my mom had breast cancer, or she has breast cancer right now. I'm having a really hard time with it. And it feels dishonest to not disclose at that point when they're being vulnerable and they're talking about something like that. I would just disclose, and then immediately it would go dark, or which that I get, right? They're already going through breast cancer trauma. They're not going to sign up for more. But I feel like I had that even from friends who either really romanticized this idea of, well, you're going to meet the perfect person and maybe they'll be on the oncology unit. And then I also had friends who were kind of like, well, you have to understand that this isn't a normal situation that people are signing up for. And so things like that. I had friends talking to me about like, well, dating people with cancer is probably a fetish. So like maybe you can meet some of those guys. Nobody understood it whatsoever.
What the heck? I'm sorry.
I didn't know.
Oh my God. What? Like, what?
Yeah.
It's crazy to me.
I didn't know that there was a cancer fetish out there. That's
yeah.
I've Googled this later. There's a fetish for sleeping with terminally ill people that is apparently like a cousin to necrophilia. It was quite something. I forget what it's called, but there's a word for it.
People are insane.
I know.
First of all, they're absolutely insane. You haven't met those people, right?
No, not that I know of.
Good.
No.
Good. Let's keep it that way.
I'm like speechless right now. I am like so processing.
I know. Shauna's face is very speechless. That's so funny. And also, like, with your friend talking about maybe you'll meet someone in the oncology department. Is that all you're worth? Like,
right. I feel like she saw The Fault in Our Stars and thought it was like so romantic and beautiful, and maybe I'll have something like that, not realizing like how difficult and traumatic all of this is. And I don't know. I felt like I couldn't talk to anyone about dating. I didn't get to the point of disclosing breast cancer with most of the guys I talked to, but the ones who I did were not interested after they heard about that. Like, it's just such a hard, nobody gets it and nobody understands how you can be like dating in this situation.
Yeah. But the thing is, like, also, I mean, I guess it depends on the opposite sex, right? But if they tell you, like, oh, this is too much for me, whatever, I don't know. For me, I would be like, well, thank you for being honest, because then you're not wasting my time. That's kind of like how I think about it. I don't know if you thought of it that way.
I think we are in like we live right now like in a society where like ghosting is a big thing. Like nobody wants to have a hard conversation, so they just go off the grid. And especially on a dating app when you're hiding behind a screen, it's so easy to just poof and be gone, right? But have you had anybody that was like, "Listen, I'm very empathetic to what you're going through. This isn't something I think I'm like equipped to deal with." Had somebody just wished you luck and you appreciated that honesty, or was it mostly ghosting?
I never got that honesty from anybody. It was always just ghosting. But I don't think I met many people off the app. And so when you're just talking on an app, I don't know, do you really owe them an emotionally intelligent response? Right. So I got it. I understood it. And yeah, I think, Rosalina, to your point, definitely that kind of honesty is like, well, they weeded themselves out and things like that. So I definitely did have that thought, and the thought that I get it. Like, I don't know if the tables had been turned, would I be jumping at the chance to be with someone who had an illness like this, right? It's one thing when you're dating before it happens, and then it's an in sickness and health thing, but it's a tough thing when it's just a stranger behind a phone screen.
Yeah. And like when people did ghost you and stuff, was there ever a time that you just wanted to give up? You were like, this is not for me?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I stopped dating like I think I did a couple of months and it was just going nowhere. And I just realized how much brain space it was taking up, being so disappointed that this is another thing cancer's taking from me, that I just kind of hung it up and was like, if something happens, great, but I'm not putting any more of my time and energy into this.
How long was it that you took a break until maybe you met David, your partner?
I was not dating at all when I met David. We met through mutual friends. My friend had co-ed bachelorette party because she has a lot of guy friends. I planned the bachelorette party and he was there. And a lot of people at that bachelorette party didn't really like, we had Zoom calls for planning ahead of time and people weren't showing up, but David was always there early with a smile on. And so we kind of got to know each other and things happened more organically. But yeah, I had been off the apps, I want to say at least 6 months before I met him. Yeah.
I guess when you guys talked casually, meaning just as friends, were there any like spark from you or him in like the beginning, or did it take a while until you guys felt that?
No, I definitely felt it from the beginning. I think, yeah, we at first, like the night before the bachelorette party, he was texting me. And at first it was like talking about the bachelorette. So of course we're chatting about this stuff. But then eventually he's just talking about nothing. And I was like, why is this guy just like talking to me and he won't stop? But then, yeah, we get there and we just had so much fun together and it was like so easy and we talked like we had known each other forever, that like I felt like the sparks were there from the get-go. And shortly after the wedding, which was maybe a month after the bachelorette, we just started hanging out every day. And since a couple weeks after the wedding, we were like a fixture. I shouldn't say every day, probably every week, but we were like a constant fixture in each other's lives. I felt it pretty early on, but I was very like, I don't want to let feelings ruin a good friendship because I doubt that he wants to sign up for something like this. And he's been so supportive through all of this that like, I'm just going to let it be what it is.
So obviously you guys had mutual friends, so he knew that you had breast
Yeah,
cancer.
he knew before we even met.
Do you think that took a little bit of the pressure off without, because you just really didn't have to disclose? Like obviously as you guys got
Yeah.
to know each other, you let more information out and more, just more of what you deal with. But do you find that that was like maybe one of the pressures of dating was like having to disclose that, and in this case you didn't?
I think absolutely. I think also him being a nurse though, because and he's a nurse and the friend we met through is also a nurse. They met at work. And so they had when they talked about it, it wasn't like, oh yeah, she's got this like terminal disease. It was like they genuinely understood what it was that they were talking about. And so that took a lot of the pressure off because I could see a scenario where I'm set up by a friend who doesn't have an intimate medical knowledge of this kind of stuff sharing that and it being dead in the water. So I think just all of the circumstances aligned really well, but for sure not having to say it and it just being kind of a known thing was really helpful because I didn't have to fear like, when do I say it? How do I say it? Is it going to ruin it? Is this going to be another thing cancer took away from me, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine that also just being like a weight lifted of just not having to have like that conversation for sure.
Absolutely.
So when was it the time where maybe you or he confessed your actual feelings for each other?
It ended up being a situation where the friend that we'd met through was kind of having a hard time that we were spending so much time together with each other and she wasn't always invited. Never on purpose. She worked some weekends and things like that. But she expressed that she had been hurt by this. And so we started talking about, well, we could invite her to this and this. And then he kind of confessed to me that sometimes I want it to just be us two. And he told me that he had feelings for me and I mean I had reciprocated, but I really thought it was just a friend thing from his end up until he confessed that.
Yeah, I feel like that was just an in for him to be like,
Yes.
well, I just want it to be us two. And then maybe not on purpose, but yes, on purpose, kind of, because he's, well, I just want to hang out with you and not bring the other friend in. Just, I feel like it was maybe kind of planned. I don't know if you know on your
I
end.
think yes and no, like a little bit of both for sure.
That whole like stage of like hanging
Yeah.
out too is so kind of blurry. Like I remember when Matt and I started dating, I didn't admit it for 6 months that we were like, my friends would be like,
Wow.
oh, like you guys are dating. I'm like, no, we're not. Like it was like a weird thing that I just like wouldn't allow myself to kind of say it. And then obviously we had a conversation and it kind of made things very clear. But
I don't know how you met Matt, but with David, like we didn't meet in like a dating context. So it's one thing if you meet on an app, but when you just meet kind of organically, how do you bridge that gap of, oh, we're just hanging out to, no, here's how I actually feel and here's what I actually want.
yeah, Matt and I met organically and we had a lot of mutual friends. So similar to you
Same sort of
where
thing. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But then it was kind of like our friends were like kind of making fun of us of being like, but like once you told your friend like, oh, like we're kind of seeing each other, and was she like, oh my god, that's so nice, or was she just like, I still want to hang out with you guys?
No, she totally got it. And she understood too why we hadn't said anything. Because even after we started dating, we didn't tell anyone for a really long while because it was like, I want to make sure that this is really a thing before we're like telling everyone. And then we have to tell everyone that it fell apart. Right. And so once we finally kind of told her and she was made aware, things got so much better. It was just a weird dynamic shift. Right. Because we had very different relationships with her and then being eventually becoming closer with each other than we were with the person we met through was just a weird dynamic, but once we got used to it, it's totally good now.
Yeah, I was gonna say, did you, I guess, within the beginning phases or even now, did you have your guard up?
I did because I had really strong feelings and so I was like, I don't want to share this and have anything get messed up. Yes, I had these feelings, but I was so attached to the friendship and whatever it was that we were doing that I was like so scared to ruin it. And I constantly had this guard up of, no, it stops here. This is where it ends. And yeah.
How long did it take you and David to tell your friends and family about that you guys were together?
Our closer friends we told earlier. So I think our close friends we told within maybe a month or so. My family, I waited a little bit longer because it's just a tougher conversation to have, if I'm
Yeah.
being honest. So yeah, we started dating in August. I don't think I told my parents until like October.
I mean, I'm the same way too. I didn't really present Brian until I was really ready because I don't want just to bring anyone along to meet my parents. So,
Right. And they
yeah.
knew him because I live at home, but I wasn't ready for it to be like, and they kept being like, so is David your boyfriend now? Is David your boyfriend now? I wasn't ready for the judgment or anything like that, that I was like, let's just let this be and we'll see where that goes.
Yeah. And I guess it was the same for David too. You didn't meet his parents until much later on as well, or like maybe around the same time that he met your parents. Was that, I guess, the same timeline?
No, so he met my parents when we were just friends because, like, he would come to pick me up and I'm
Oh,
living at
right.
home. And so he would
Yes.
meet them that way. I didn't meet his parents until much later. His parents, it was a lot more of a struggle because David's Chinese and they don't speak a whole ton of English. Like, we're able to communicate, but not meeting them was like really anxiety inducing and just a little bit more difficult, but they're great people and they were much more accepting than I think either of us expected them to be.
Yeah. So basically, David would have to translate for you,
Pretty
right?
much, yeah.
Yeah.
His dad usually understood me and I could understand him, but when he got really into telling a story, it would like I get it. And then all of a sudden it kind of devolves into using different syntax and whatnot that
Yeah.
doesn't totally make sense. But yeah.
Yeah. I, it's like the same way with my parents. So my parents, they are Hispanic like myself. And I would have to translate for Brian sometimes as well. Like my mom speaks like better English than my father, but yeah, it was like the same thing where like Brian was more nervous because he didn't know how he was able to communicate with my parents. So I'm sure it was the same way as you.
Right. And it was such a tricky thing too, because David was at his parents when I was working one day before I had met them. And they said something about, like, oh, we want to meet your new girlfriend. Let's all go to a restaurant for dinner. And he was like, okay, but we have to sit outside. And they kept pressuring him, like, why does it have to be outside? What's the deal? And he finally was like, she has cancer. Okay. And so it turned like that preceded me. And that was a really intimidating situation to walk into as well. The only thing they know about me is I have cancer and I'm dating their son.
Yeah. And so, in terms of just the emotions that you and David have faced in your relationship thus far, were there any challenges? I don't know if you wanted to speak on any experiences.
Absolutely. I mean, we've we've dealt with a lot of stuff, right? The first time we kissed, I got sick and had an infection because I'm immunocompromised. We had to get through that. I think David, especially when we first started dating, would have wanted to do a lot more COVID unsafe things that I just wasn't able to do. And then moving beyond that, like whenever I've had progression or I've been in radiation or dealing with these really tough, heavy things. I remember recently the most recent progression happened. I had just started my new med and I was feeling terrible. I was super nauseous. Everything felt awful. And David came home and I just started sobbing and was like, you're the only person I can talk to about this. And feel like you understand it. And I just watch his face, like he looks so helpless. He just wants to do something and like he can't help me through this, right? Like he can help emotionally, but there's nothing he can do to take it away. And that's a really difficult situation. And then I want him to be able to share his feelings and his emotions with me, but so much of the stress of our relationship is my cancer and I can be there for him, but I have to be there for me first. And so it's a really difficult thing of like him needing to have his support system, me having mine. And I don't know, oftentimes I feel like just by virtue of me having cancer, there's a power imbalance because I can come to him with all of these struggles, but he can't always come to me with some of the fears that he has because they're fears about me. And so, yeah, we've been able to navigate it really well. We both have great therapists and good support systems. And so we've been okay, but it is not easy whatsoever.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, was there any tips or maybe things that you guys know? Like you mentioned, you need to focus on yourself more because obviously that is the case. And then for him, maybe there's less of a focus. And so I'm just kind of curious how you're able to navigate.
Yeah, we're kind of annoyingly communicative. We just have to be so open about our needs. And so when I have a scan scheduled, it's always, okay, you're working this day. How do you want me to tell you my scan results? Right? Do you want me to call you so that you can step away from the unit? Do you want me to send a text? What do you feel is right for you? Right? And like when I had radiation, then 3 weeks later, I had my ovaries out, and then progression was happening. And there was just so much happening that he was starting to have caregiver fatigue, right? Of just everything is focused on me and it's all about this health stuff and we're not able to be romantic anymore. And he expressed that to me, like rather than just letting it stew, it was like, hey, I'm having a hard time here. Can we have a date night, even if it's just like a date night in where we don't talk about this? We just have to be so much more open with each other than I think most couples do because we're dealing with something so heavy on a daily basis that most people don't deal with at 30 and 33.
Yeah, so kind of what I heard was that you guys communicate way more. He feels comfortable going to you and telling you when his needs aren't met. And then the other thing that I thought was interesting was that you expressed or you asked him, like, okay, so when do you want me to tell my results? And I thought that was interesting too, because I feel like some people need time to mentally prepare themselves
Mm-hmm.
like throughout the day. And I feel like that is like a nice question to also ask your partner too. Because what if they're like in the middle of doing something and then you told them and they're like, well, I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. So I thought that was really nice of you to ask.
I think it's really important to I never understood the term co-survivor until we started dating, but really I might be physically fighting this, but he's emotionally fighting it with me and we're a team in this. And so we have to consider each other. And so I never do anything that will hurt me or my emotions or anything like that, but I have to consider his emotions as well, especially like when he's at work. If I just send him a text that he sees on his Apple Watch and then he can't get off the unit for another 6 hours to talk to me, that's all that's going through his head. And that's a really, really difficult thing, right? So we just have to kind of think about each other and where each other are at.
Definitely. I think, yeah, well, he's going, like you said, he's emotionally dealing with your cancer. He's in the trenches with you, essentially. And I think also
Absolutely.
that's like him even saying, like, I need a date night, almost setting a boundary, like, can we have a date night and just not pretend for one night, like, not talk about this? Maybe not pretend, but let's just not bring this up. Like, setting a boundary for, like, mental space, I think is so important. And I like that. Like, just Matt and I think I've also had, like, conversations like that. Like, today, we're going to pretend cancer is not a thing today. And it's, like, kind of important for, I think, just like a mind shift of just, okay, it's just like a day off, right? Like your brain just gets a day off and you get to enjoy yourself. And I mean, you obviously don't forget that you have it, but it's nice to be able to just put it out of your head for a little bit, I think.
Absolutely. His therapist had suggested when he was feeling really, really fatigued that we start talking about cancer in check ins. And so we would have every 2 weeks a scheduled time where this is when we talk about the things so that it's not just coming up while we're having a nice dinner. Like, I remember one time we were at afternoon tea, and I don't know what was like going through my brain, but I was just like talking about, well, when I'm gone and stuff like that. And he was like crying at the table while we're at Neiman Marcus. Like, that was not okay for me to do. Right. And so having these times that, hey, we have a dedicated time to talk about this meant that I got to be able to, I knew I was going to be able to share my feelings. He knew that he was going to be in a safe space when I shared those. And that's really helpful too. And it's, I mean, ultimately it's whatever works for you and your relationship. But for us, that's like during the really heavy periods been important.
So important.
Yeah, I was just say like I want you to give tips for anyone out there who needs them, because sometimes like you're just so focused on your own relationship that there's something that's not working. And so sometimes by just hearing you say, here are the things that work for us, I feel like that could change things around their own relationship.
Yeah, well, I mean, I hope that's helpful. Those have been the biggest things for me, but if anyone listening is struggling with this kind of thing, I'm always here and happy to talk through it.
I have a question. So you had
Absolutely.
mentioned like you kind of lived every 3 months, right? So you have scans. Like that's like mentally how you plan, right? But you are very type A. You like a plan. How is it navigating your relationship around like those 3 months? Because right, anything can happen. Like you said, shifting in medicines, shifting in different scans, shift like just a lot of different things can happen. How do you plan for like trips? Do you find yourself just being more spontaneous and being like, you know what? Like, we're having a good weekend. Like, we're both off. I'm feeling good. Let's book this. Do you find yourself doing things like that and being like more spontaneous? Or do you find yourself still having to stick to the plan and the schedule of scans and treatment?
Yeah, I don't think either of us are spontaneous people. So, generally, the way that we've done it so far, and I don't think that this will work forever, but it's working for right now, is we'll plan something. Like, we just booked a Euro trip that's in May, so ways away. But we kind of look at things and take them as they come. Like when I had this most recent off cycle scan that showed progression, we were supposed to be leaving for our anniversary trip right when the worst of the GI side effects were supposed to be starting. And so it was like, we sat down, okay, what does this look like? He bought like a portable toilet that like compostable and a privacy tent and had all of this stuff like, if you need this, it's here. If we need to cancel, we can do that. We can reschedule. Like, we aren't spontaneous, but we're more willing to be flexible with the plans. Like, maybe we'll have a hiking trip planned and we'll only do one hike, and the rest of the time we'll just drive around to cool viewpoints and take photos from there so that I can stay in the car if I'm too fatigued or things like that. So we'll like make general plans and then we'll fine tune them as we need to as they get closer and my situation is more clear.
It sounds like there isn't such like a high expectations of trying to do the activity or trip that you guys plan. I feel like you just take it like hour by hour, day by day, you know what I mean? If anything was to go wrong, then I think you both understand that things happen, of course. So I think that puts a lot of less weight on your shoulder too, of just, I don't know. Yeah, that's.
I mean, I definitely have guilt. We'll go somewhere and not be able to do the things. I'm trying to think. Oh, we were looking at ATVing when we were down in Mexico, but then it was like, I have just had progression to my pelvic bone. We don't know how safe this is. And so we didn't go because we were scared it would aggravate my cancer more. And I feel guilty. Like, I want him to be able to experience these things. And I've always been very clear that if I can't do something, you can go with a friend. I never want to hold you back from something, but sometimes it's, well, I want to experience this thing with you. And if you can't do it, then we'll wait till you can. And I definitely feel like guilty about it, but I'll tell him that I feel guilty, right? And he'll tell me that like, hey, I really want to do this thing. If you're not able, can I go with this person? So it's just again, like being overly communicative of exactly where we're at when we have to switch things up and how we're feeling and what's stressing us out so that we can be there for each other.
Yeah, definitely. And so in society, we've ingrained a specific path, right? Of like when you find a partner, then you get married, then you buy a house, you have children, you live quote unquote happily ever after. Before your cancer diagnosis and before meeting David, and maybe we can talk about after meeting David as well, did you wanted to follow a similar path? Has your perspective changed? Just wanting to hear what your thoughts were, or are, I
Yeah.
should say.
Yeah, so I was always brought up that you save for a house, and this is kind of, I think buying a home especially was like really drilled into me since I was a kid, and that you need to be saving your money, and this is how you get stability and things like that. And so that has always been a big thing, and I've always known that I wanted to get married. I was unsure on kids before I got sick, but beyond that, I think I definitely saw myself in a pretty traditional life path. And I think with cancer, I've just had to take a look at what's really important to me. And David and I just had this conversation recently that, yeah, I have stage 4 cancer, but we're still pretty lucky because my friends who want to have kids in a home are having to save so much of their money versus for us, that is not a priority. So we're able to travel like a crap ton more than other people, right? Because I want to get in as much as I can in this very abbreviated timeline. And so that's where our priority is, and that's where the money goes. And so I do feel like it's changed a little bit that like every couple and every person is going to have different expectations. And I'm kind of happy with where mine has led. I think we might see part of that traditional life path at some point. Like, I don't think marriage is off the table for David and I. But beyond that, I think we're carving our own path, and it's been really fun.
Yeah, as I say, that is so awesome. But I just think that if you're like in the moment and you want something, like, why not do it, right? You're still living, you're still here. And so I just think that I feel like we shouldn't really think about, oh, well, I'm not going to live like for this long. So, like, why even bother? It's no, if you really want this, then why not? But I don't know what your thoughts are with that.
No, I totally feel that exact way. And I mean, we've been together for a year, and in that year, we've gone hot air ballooning. We went to Cabo. He snorkeled he was scared to like swim when we met because he had had a drowning incident as a kid, and he snorkeled with me in Mexico. Like, we have experienced so many things that so much of the world hasn't gotten to see. And I think that's just as beautiful as people bringing babies into this world. It's just different. We're able to do the things that really called to us. And some people, that's marriage and kids and a house and 2.5 kids and a picket fence. And for us, it's traveling and seeing the world and experiencing so many new things.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. I love that.
Thank you.
Kind of to end this with like, how can someone with stage 4 maintain a personal identity separate from the cancer like diagnosis? I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so I was just talking to someone earlier today about this. I don't think that cancer takes away who you are. It takes so much. But I think for me, cancer brought me closer to who I am. It helped me learn what was important to me. It helped me understand my values so much more clearly. And so I think for me, it's just been an exercise in figuring out what is important to me. And then my oncologist always tells me, we do not work fun around cancer. We work cancer stuff around fun. And she always makes sure I had so many trips planned with this progression. And I asked, can I go on a lower dose and then go up later so that I can make sure that I can enjoy this stuff? Absolutely. Right. And so I think it's, for me, always been a balance of quality over quantity and figuring out what is important to me. And this isn't always going to be possible, right? Once things get more dire, I'm going to have to give things up in order to get the treatments that I need. But I think at least in this beginning phase, these first couple of years, I think it's find what's important to you and make sure that you are able to fit that in your life, however that looks. Like, I was big into working out. I ran Spartan races. Now I like work out in the garage, but I've found ways to integrate the things that I care about into the life that I have now. And I think that's the most important thing to maintaining your own identity.
I honestly think that was so beautifully said. Everything and
you.
everything that you said was so beautiful. So thank you so much. And I mean, I feel like anyone who's hearing this, I hope that brings some sort of hope or inspiration, I guess, from this episode. So thank you for that. And just to close it off, was there anything else that you wanted to mention? And also, where can people find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. I'm at Chiara versus Cancer. Chiara is spelled Chiara and then VS Cancer. So you can find me there. I think the only other thing I wanted to mention, I just wanted to give a quick plug to Be Present. We talked about them at the top, but it's an org that I volunteer with, and we're really focused on helping supporters of those with cancer be better at support, which is, I think, an area in the AYA community that's really lacking. So yeah, definitely check us out.
Perfect. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Future Rosalina here. Before we head out to our outro of today's episode, I just wanted to share a very exciting update about Chiara. A month after recording this episode, David, her partner, now fiance, proposed to her. She said yes. We want to give them our well wishes and big congratulations to them both.
A very special thanks to our podcast producer, Bethany Allard, and our podcast editor, Ayla Anderson.
Thank you all for listening and supporting our podcast. Sharing our stories with you has been incredibly healing for both of us, and we hope it helps other women in their journeys through breast cancer.
Ladies, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and fellow breasties. Help us reach more women by subscribing and rating us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and now on YouTube. You can follow us on Instagram at TYFTS Podcast and email us at tftspodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from you guys, so shoot us a message. We will link any resources from the episode in our show notes.